So let's begin our second lesson. So that's how to improve listening skills and listening comprehension. What difficulties do we come across while learning and teaching listening, and how to overcome them? So we are given two ears but only one mouth because listening is twice as hard as talking. So as long as this quotation says, listening is a very difficult task, especially for second language learners, as they are usually not accustomed to listening to the native speech in the native speed. So this causes much difficulty for them to learn this skill professionally. And this causes some difficulties for teachers in terms of choosing appropriate materials for teaching listening. What this means, should material be taken from a course book where it's more or less adapted to different level students based on the level of the course book itself, well, which is usually stated just right on the cover of the book. Then the next aspect is whether the materials that you choose are acceptable in cultural and other aspects for your students. So, and then choosing tasks appropriate to the listening task is also a controversial issue. So, difficulties in listening. So, listening is not focused at high schools. Usually, at school, students follow some course book materials, which means the listenings are usually easier than the real life speech that they have to listen, which makes them not so well prepared for real life occasions or communications. So then lack of facilities and resources to utilize little of them. So usually teachers might experience these difficulties while teaching language. So they can lack appropriate recordings, so tapes or cassette players, well, computers, video clips, movies, internet, English speaking people, and clubs. So teachers usually have an immense choice of authentic materials for listening. Authentic material for listening means those recordings, videos, movies, or any other materials that are created for native speaker users, but not for the language learners. So there is much information now available in the internet and in CDs and DVDs. But as I said, it's difficult for the teacher to use appropriate to select appropriate material that could be effectively used in particular classroom because student interests differ, student kind of some students can be motivated by certain listenings they do, but some students can be bored. So it's really difficult to choose one material that would meet the needs of the whole class. So then, students usually experience some difficulties while listening and are always unwilling to do the listening because they mostly feel they are failing if they can't understand every word. This creates worry and stress. So when students listen to authentic material specifically, they tend to kind of skip some words and even sentences which cause confusion in them because they probably never came across those words or sentences or phrases in their normal academic circumstances. So some students can only understand if people speak slowly and clearly. Yes, some students who consider themselves efficient listeners will turn to be efficient only when they listen to a slow and clear speech, which is not always so in authentic materials. So some students find it hard to keep up with all the information coming their way. So usually if the recording is an extract from a broadcast, a news broadcast, or a TV show, or even a film, so usually there is too much information that can cause some feeling of being overwhelmed in students. So students might find it hard to keep up with all the information coming their way, and then they get very tired during long listenings. So the length of listening is again an important issue, which means a very short listening might not give the required results, and whether the very long listening might make them feel tired and exhausted. So what to do? So listen to something you enjoy. So a teacher can offer students some listening that they would enjoy and that they would do at home. For example, assigning some audiobooks or some interesting movies with subtitles sometimes, which students can listen for enjoyment so that they at least adapt themselves to the target language, to how it sounds in native circumstances. So listening for the main ideas, so tasks where students have to note down main ideas. So by skipping some difficult and familiar words, so where they pay attention not to all the words and all the details and grammar, but where they have to find out and extract main ideas. So these activities are useful. So listening for specific information. So once they have the general idea of what's being said, they can be offered some tasks where they have to fill in with specific information, such as filling in with letters, numbers, or some specific information. So identify stresses and reductions. Students can do some exercises where they have to, especially if they are listening to a conversation between several people, they have to orientate themselves between the shifts when speakers change turns to speak about something. And reductions. So mostly natural speech means some reductions, and not all the words and sounds are pronounced clearly, especially in those outside native speaker materials. So definitely teachers should provide some practice to overcome these difficulties. Get meaning from context. As it was said earlier, some students get discouraged when they come across words or sentences that they don't know in the recording. So, and if they learn to get the general meaning from the context, so this would help them at least overcome that worry and stress. So, most beginners get difficulty due to the lack of vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar. So basically, the most of the complaints the students make while listening is that they don't understand certain words that are being said. That's probably because of the limited vocabulary, or maybe they know those words, but they learned them with wrong pronunciation, or they are not familiar with the uses of that word in different grammar structures or different contexts. So select a book with a cassette suitable for your level. It helps practice the listening easily and you can anticipate the level of difficulty. So here for the beginners and those listeners who have difficulties while listening, the best advice is to select a um, book that's tailored specifically for the level of the student, for starter, beginner, intermediate, upper intermediate, and etc. And do the recordings offered in that book first. So listen to the cassette without reading the text dialogue once or twice. When you find difficulty in grasping the meaning, listen again while scrutinizing the text. So once some authentic materials are brought to the students and they listen to it and do some exercises, so it would be wise to offer them the script of that listening, maybe as a home task, so that they can practice it further at home and make notes of the ideas and sentences they couldn't understand the first time. So pay attention carefully to the pronunciation and intonation. If you want to improve your pronunciation, listen and repeat the dialect text by pausing each sentence. So this means, according to the principle of language skill integration, so listening could be combined with speaking, when students listen to some authentic materials and then pause that material after each sentence and imitate the intonation, the pronunciation, the stress of the native speaker. And they can record themselves during this practice and send it to their teachers for evaluation, or just keep it for themselves so that while they improve their listening, at the same time they improve their speaking skills as well. So, so after listening to the text, dialogue, do the exercise and check your answers with the keys. So usually when you do exercise in the class, they are usually checked. So if you watch TV, select the English program or film, listen to the dialogue carefully without reading the translation. So as I said, so giving students a home assignment of watching a film, if the language is too difficult for students or the level is a bit low, so they could probably be offered films with subtitles, for which they first listen and watch them and read them without any assistance, any vocabulary or translation for 1 or 2 times, and then they can use their dictionaries to translate and see whether they could infer and guess the meaning correctly. Listen to English songs and learn the verse. If you like singing, memorize the verse and sing them. So although this is not as effective as watching movies or listening to some specific dialects, so listening to songs is just an enjoyable way to practice your listening and speaking skills. So then there are some issues, mental issues or other specific issues that should be taken into account while organizing listening material. So mentally put yourself in other person's shoes. So a teacher should think from the perspective of students. How would they feel while listening to that material? So spend more time listening than talking. So a teacher should several times listen to the material that she is going to take for the class to see if it's appropriate culturally and the language is okay and the level and speed would suit the students. Listen unconsciously to radio, television, movie, ask questions. So students can be offered a practice of listening to some materials at home, just at the background. So although they will not pay attention to all the details, so some aspects still can be useful for them. So and then they could ask questions from themselves that would lead them to better understanding of that recording. So don't translate, create barrier between speaker and listener. So it would be better if students are offered material which they don't have to translate, but try to catch the meaning from the context. So students should be offered some tips while practicing listening. So work at listening, be alert and alive. So while they are doing listening practice, so all the distractions in the classroom should be avoided, such as noise from the outside. This means it's better to close the windows if there are some car noise or people talking outside, which would distract them highly from listening to the material effectively. So keep emotions under control when listening. So this means if students get angry at not understanding some pieces of listening, a teacher should conduct some instructions before the listening to explain to the students that sometimes it's okay not to understand word for word and that they will discuss it after the listening tasks. Open your mind, practice accepting new information. Sometimes the information that students listen to could be quite controversial to their own opinion. So in this case, again, they should be listening should follow some discussion of the ideas and why it's better to be open-minded and accept the ideas as they are. So breathe slowly and deeply. So a very simple strategy, but still it's necessary to be focused and calm while listening to improve the efficiency. Relax physically, get comfortable. So it's the teacher's task again, not only to provide good materials, but to create all those conditions that would help students to be effective in their listening skills. So let's look at some experience, my classroom experience that shows what's important in organizing listening. So listen, sing English songs, as I said, so it's very helpful to do some, although not the most effective, but still enjoyable activities with students in the class that would engage them in singing, in communication, that would relieve the stress of the actual listening practice. To listen to radios, tapes, internet movies, television. If fine, I listen to attentively. If not, I will just listen relaxingly. So after classes, students can be offered those materials, authentic materials, so that they listen and practice them at home. Listen to different fields. It's better if students are brought listening materials from different fields. So talk to foreigners and friends. So if it's acceptable, a teacher can invite some foreigners or some co-workers with good speaking skills so that students experience listening not only to the taped material but to the real life speech as well. So use resources available, internet. So teacher can suggest some internet resources that students can use at home or when they are free to practice their listening skills. Set a goal when listening or talking. And definitely while assigning tasks for listening, there should be some goal at the end of those tasks so that students feel that task completion is a priority for them. And one more important thing, remember failure is a mother of success. Allow yourself to make mistakes. Don't worry, the game is still long. So this means it's the task of the teacher to explain to students that although they fail some activities, some tasks of listening, so it's practice that makes perfect. And the failure is just the mother of success. This means every success starts from a failure. So it's necessary to explain to students that it's okay to make mistakes. So that's all for today. Thank you for your attention.